The 911 call crackles with raw, breathless panic. A friend, gasping for air, is trying to articulate the unspeakable horror he's just stumbled upon inside a small house in Farmersville, Illinois. It's the morning of Thanksgiving 2021, a day meant for gratitude and family. He was just doing the right thing, checking on his friend, Chris Smith, when he found the front door ominously ajar, the glass on its frame shattered and glinting on the floor. But as he stepped inside, the festive peace of the holiday was violently erased, replaced by a scene of absolute carnage. It was a tableau of pure terror. Blood was everywhere. A Jackson Pollock of violence splattered across the kitchen cabinets, streaked on the countertops and pooled on the floor. In the living room, a woman, a guest in this home, was lying motionless, her life extinguished. And in the kitchen, barely clinging to a fragile thread of life, was Chris. He'd been shot in the head, left for dead. The woman was his date, someone he had just met the night before. This was their very first date, an evening that began with the promise of a new connection, a new chapter. But that promise was annihilated by an explosion of brutal, calculated violence, turning a hopeful, budding romance into a blood-soaked crime scene. How does a night that starts with so much potential, so much simple joy, end in a bloodbath? Who was the monster lurking in the shadows, waiting to turn a dream into an unimaginable nightmare? To truly grasp the depths of this tragedy, you first have to understand the vibrant hope that preceded it. This is a story about two people, Leslie Reeves and Christopher Smith, who were both standing at a hopeful crossroads, ready and eager to start a new chapter in their lives. Leslie Reeves was, by all accounts, a force of nature. At 45, she was not only a successful entrepreneur and the proud owner of a thriving fitness studio in Troy, Illinois, but she was also a pillar of her community. A divorced mother of two, Leslie had channeled her life's experiences into a mission of empowering others, especially women. She was widely known and respected for teaching self-defense classes, a passion born from a deep-seated desire to see women feel strong, capable, and safe. Her friends would describe her as courageous and vibrant, a woman who lit up every room she entered. She was also a fierce and outspoken advocate for victims of domestic violence. Leslie had meticulously built a beautiful life for herself and her children, a life founded on principles of strength, resilience, and fierce independence. She was a woman who knew her own worth and was finally ready to find a partner who could see and appreciate it too. Miles away in the quiet town of Farmersville lived Christopher Smith, a 48-year-old musician with a kind heart and a profoundly creative soul. He too was a single parent, a devoted dad who had carved out a good life for himself and his daughter. He ran his own business, lived in a beautiful home on a quiet, peaceful piece of land, and found immense joy in his lifelong love for music. Those who knew him best describe him as a gentle, easygoing guy, the kind of warm, dependable person who was always ready with a smile and a helping hand. After a period of being single, he felt he was finally ready to open his heart again. He wasn't just looking for companionship. He was searching for a genuine, meaningful connection, someone to share the life he had so carefully built. In the crisp autumn of 2021, their two separate paths converged in the most modern of ways, online. They began talking and the connection was instantaneous. There was an undeniable spark, a chemistry that crackled through their messages and phone calls. The conversations flowed effortlessly, filled with easy laughter and shared understanding. For 2 weeks, the excitement grew with every chat. They discovered they had shared interests, a similar outlook on life, and the same hopes for the future. It felt real, it felt promising, it felt like it could be the real deal. Finally, they decided it was time to bridge the digital gap and meet in person. They set a date for the night before Thanksgiving, November 24, 2021. For both Leslie and Chris, the air was thick with anticipation. This felt like it could be the start of something truly wonderful. The evening began at the Uptown Saloon in Farmersville, a cozy, welcoming local bar where they could talk without distraction and really get to know each other. And that chemistry they'd felt online? It was even more potent in person. The conversation was a seamless river of laughter and shared smiles. It was the kind of perfect first date everyone dreams of, comfortable yet exciting, familiar yet full of possibility. They were two people in their 40s, people who had weathered the storms of life, finding a simple, pure, and hopeful connection with one another. As the night wore on, neither of them wanted it to end. They made a spontaneous plan to head back to Chris's house, just a short drive away, to hang out, share a pizza, and let the conversation continue. It was an easy, natural decision, the kind you make when a first date is going perfectly. It just felt right. As they left the warmth of the bar and drove through the quiet, dark Illinois night, there was no sense of foreboding, Not even a whisper of the darkness that was gathering just over the horizon. It was just two people on the verge of a new love story, heading home to continue what felt like a perfect evening. They had no idea they weren't going home alone. They were being followed. While Leslie Reeves was courageously building a new life and opening her heart to the possibility of new love, a dark shadow from her past was lingering, a presence that refused to let go. That shadow had a name: Robert Bobby Tarr. A contractor from the nearby town of Collinsville, Tarr was Leslie's ex-boyfriend. To the outside world he might have seemed like a regular guy, a divorced father of three just trying to get by. But to Leslie and her inner circle of friends, he was becoming a growing source of fear and anxiety. Their relationship was definitively over, but for Tarr that rejection was a reality he simply could not or would not accept. In the weeks leading up to the attack, Leslie's friends had become increasingly worried about his escalating behavior. They described him as controlling and possessive, a man who seemed pathologically unable to grasp that Leslie had truly moved on. His actions had devolved from the merely annoying to outright stalking. He was monitoring her movements, incessantly questioning her about her whereabouts, and making it chillingly clear that he was always watching her. This was far more than a case of a jilted ex-boyfriend struggling with a breakup. It was a disturbing pattern of obsession that had put Leslie on constant high alert. She confided in her friends about her concerns, about the profound unease Tarr's predatory actions made her feel. Here was a strong, independent woman, a self-defense instructor who taught other women how to protect themselves, and yet she found herself trapped in the terrifyingly common position of being stalked by a man she once trusted. It's a uniquely terrifying situation, where the threat feels both intimately personal and dangerously unpredictable. Her friends pleaded with her to be careful. Some even voiced the wish that she would carry the handgun she legally owned for protection, a thought that would later become tragically, heartbreakingly ironic. On the night of November 24th, while Leslie and Chris were lost in the joy of their successful first date at the Uptown Saloon, Bobby Tarr was not at home as he would later claim. He was consumed by his spiraling obsession. He knew Leslie was on a date, and the thought of her finding happiness with another man was apparently more than his fragile ego could handle. In a text message that would later surface in court, he cynically speculated about why Leslie would drive so far from her home in Troy, writing with bitter certainty, "I think it's for a dude." Fueled by a toxic cocktail of jealousy and rage, Tarr made a fateful decision. He got into his white Volkswagen Jetta and drove the 75 miles from his home in Collinsville to Farmersville. He located the Uptown Saloon. And then, cloaked by the darkness, he watched. He watched as Leslie and Chris talked, laughed, and forged a connection. Prosecutors would later argue that he didn't just watch, he plotted. During this time, his phone records revealed he was frantically searching the internet for Christopher Smith, even trying to find his Facebook profile. He was putting a name and a face to the man who, in his twisted mind, was his rival. When Leslie and Chris finally left the bar, Tarr followed them. He tailed their car through the dark, winding country roads, a silent, menacing presence in their rearview mirror. They pulled up to Chris's house, a secluded home that offered privacy, but as it turned out, also provided a dangerous isolation. As they walked inside, planning to bake a frozen pizza and simply enjoy each other's company, they were completely unaware that the real threat wasn't some random stranger in the dark. It was a man Leslie knew all too well, a man whose obsession had just followed them home. The perfect first date was about to be shattered by a storm of violent rage that had been brewing for weeks. Inside Chris Smith's home, the atmosphere was relaxed, happy, and filled with promise. The oven was preheating for a late-night pizza, a simple, perfect end to a wonderful evening. Chris and Leslie were in the kitchen, their conversation likely still punctuated by laughter, simply enjoying the easy comfort that had blossomed between them. It was around 1 a.m., now officially Thanksgiving morning. But in a single violent instant all of that peace was utterly obliterated. A deafening crash erupted from the side door as the glass pane shattered and the door was kicked open. It was Bobby Tarr, armed and enraged, breaking into the house. What followed was a maelstrom of chaos and terror, a desperate fight for life that investigators would later have to piece together from the brutal evidence left behind. It is terrifyingly clear that Leslie and Chris didn't just surrender, they fought back with everything they had. Leslie, the self-defense instructor, and Chris, a man defending his home and his guest, immediately sprang into action. The evidence points to a frantic, desperate struggle that began right at the doorway. The refrigerator had been pulled away from the wall, a clear indication of a last-ditch attempt to barricade the door and keep the intruder out. Furniture was overturned, a testament to the violent physical battle that took place. In what must have been moments of pure, unadulterated terror, Chris crouched down, trying to use his own body as a wedge to hold the door shut, while Leslie likely helped him push the heavy refrigerator against it. They were fighting for their lives against an unseen force of pure hatred on the other side. But Tarr had a gun. As Chris crouched low, a gunshot exploded through the door. The bullet struck him in the head and he collapsed to the floor, instantly incapacitated. With Chris down, the primary barrier was gone. Tarr burst into the kitchen. Leslie, now alone and facing her armed, obsessive ex-boyfriend, ran into the living room, desperately trying to find cover, to find an escape. But there was nowhere to go. Tarr pursued her, tracked her down. He raised his 9mm handgun and fired. Leslie was shot once in the back of the head. She died almost instantly. The aftermath was a scene of chilling silence and absolute devastation. In the living room lay Leslie Reeves, her vibrant life stolen in a single brutal, cowardly moment. In the kitchen, surrounded by the wreckage of their struggle, lay Christopher Smith, bleeding profusely from a catastrophic head wound. The pizza they were about to share was left burning in the oven, filling the house with acrid smoke. 2 silver 9mm shell casings were left behind, one in the kitchen and one near Leslie's body, the killer's only calling cards. For the next 12 agonizing hours, Chris lay on his cold kitchen floor, drifting in and out of consciousness as his life hung by a thread. The house grew frigid as the cold November air poured in through the shattered door. But he wasn't entirely alone. His loyal dog, a pit bull named Tiki, stayed right by his side through the entire ordeal. She cuddled up next to him, her body heat a small but vital comfort against the creeping cold. In a situation where every second and every degree mattered, that simple, profound act of loyalty from his dog may very well have been what kept him alive until help finally arrived. And while Chris was fighting for his life, the man who shot him was long gone, having vanished back into the night, leaving behind a bloodbath and a life hanging in the balance. Thanksgiving Day 2021 dawned with a growing sense of dread for Leslie Reeves' friends and family. Leslie was the definition of reliable, so when she failed to show up for holiday plans and wasn't answering her phone, initial worry quickly escalated into full-blown alarm. Knowing about her date with Chris Smith and more importantly, knowing about her ongoing and frightening problems with Bobby Tarr, a concerned friend made the decision to drive to Chris's house in Farmersville to check on her. It was that friend who walked into the unimaginable carnage and made the frantic, panicked 911 call that sent police racing to the secluded property. When deputies from the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office arrived, they were confronted with what one veteran investigator would later describe as one of the most horrific and bloody crime scenes he had witnessed in his entire career. The kitchen was a sea of blood. There they found Christopher Smith on the floor, miraculously alive, but with a devastating gunshot wound to his head. He was immediately airlifted to the hospital and placed in a medically induced coma as doctors fought to save his life. In the adjacent living room they found Leslie Reeves. It was tragically obvious she had been dead for hours. The initial moments of the investigation were a chaotic puzzle. They found the 2 9mm shell casings, but the murder weapon was nowhere in sight. That immediately told them that a third person was involved. This wasn't a tragic accident or a murder-suicide. It was a home invasion, a murder, and an attempted murder. The burning question was, who did it? They didn't have to look far for their prime suspect. As soon as Leslie's friends and family learned of the horrific attack, they all pointed the police in one single, unwavering direction: Bobby Tarr. They told investigators everything, about his history of obsessive stalking, his controlling and possessive behavior, and his outright refusal to accept that the relationship was over. This gave the police a powerful and immediate lead. They located Tarr and brought him in for questioning. From the very start, Tarr's story was a web of contradictions and blatant lies. He initially tried to claim that his relationship with Leslie was ongoing and that they were on good terms, a pathetic assertion that her friends immediately and vehemently refuted. When detectives asked for his alibi for the night of the murder, he stated with absolute certainty that he was at home all night with his daughter, Shelby. He claimed he only left the house once for a very brief period. He also lied about his familiarity with the area, telling detectives he had no idea where the town of Farmersville even was. But his carefully constructed alibis began to crumble almost immediately. When investigators spoke with his daughter, Shelby, her account did not align with her father's. She confirmed that he had, in fact, left the house not once, but twice on the night of November 24th. And one of those times he was gone for a significant period, approximately 2.5 hours. The final, decisive nail in his alibi's coffin was delivered by technology. Investigators meticulously pulled traffic camera footage from the roads between Troy and Farmersville. The footage unequivocally showed Tarr's white Volkswagen Jetta making the 75-mile journey on the night of the murder. They also uncovered surveillance video from a gas station near Tarr's home, showing him calmly buying gas just after midnight on Thanksgiving morning. When they confronted him with the gas station receipt, Tarr became flustered but remained defiant, arrogantly asking what buying gas proved. To investigators, it proved he was a liar. He had lied about being home and he had lied about being anywhere near the crime scene. With his alibi in tatters, investigators arrested Bobby Tarr on November 26, just one day after the brutal attack. They moved with urgency, not just because he was their prime suspect, but because they genuinely feared for Chris Smith's safety. The murder weapon was still missing, and they worried what Tarr might do to eliminate more evidence, or far worse, to silence the only other witness to his heinous crime. While Tarr sat in a jail cell, the case against him was far from a slam dunk. An exhaustive search of his car and his person had turned up no forensic evidence linking him to the crime. There was no blood in his vehicle. No DNA of his was found in Chris's house. No fingerprints. The prosecution now faced the daunting task of building a first-degree murder case almost entirely on circumstantial evidence. They had his lies, the surveillance footage placing him in the area, and a powerful motive of jealous rage, but they were missing that direct physical proof that so often seals a conviction. The stage was set for a tense legal battle that would hinge on whether a jury could be convinced, beyond a reasonable doubt, that all the pieces pointed to only one person. With Bobby Tarr in custody, investigators continued to dig relentlessly, knowing that their entire case rested on transforming a mountain of circumstantial evidence into an unshakable narrative of guilt. Their big break came from an unexpected source. A week after the shooting, one of Tarr's friends, a man named Billy Adams, contacted the police. He told them a startling story. Tarr had called him from jail with a very strange and highly specific request. Fortunately for the prosecution, the jailhouse call had been recorded. In it, Tarr could be heard asking Adams to go to his property and get rid of some aluminum brackets from his front yard. The request was so bizarre and suspicious that it gave investigators probable cause to secure another warrant to search Tarr's property. And this time they found it. Hidden on the property was a firearm. Ballistics tests soon confirmed it was the 9mm handgun used to murder Leslie Reeves and nearly kill Christopher Smith. This was a monumental discovery, but Tarr, ever the manipulator, had an explanation ready. He claimed the gun actually belonged to Leslie and that she had purchased it from him. It was a flimsy, desperate attempt to sow doubt, but it was too little, too late. The prosecution now had the murder weapon. While Tarr awaited trial, the case took another dark and sinister turn. An inmate at the Montgomery County Jail came forward with a chilling allegation. He claimed that Tarr had attempted to hire him to kill the two individuals who could guarantee his conviction: the sole survivor and star witness, Christopher Smith, and the lead investigator on the case, Detective Jeff Roach. According to the inmate, Tarr had offered him $10,000 to carry out the assassinations. Based on this credible threat, in September 2022, a grand jury indicted Tarr on 2 additional counts of solicitation of murder for hire. This alleged plot laid bare the depths of his depravity and his frantic desperation to escape justice. Prosecutors wisely decided to try the murder and attempted murder charges first, keeping the solicitation charges in their back pocket to avoid overcomplicating the initial trial. The trial of Robert "Bobby" Tarr finally began in April 2024. Montgomery County State's Attorney Andrew Affronti methodically laid out the prosecution's case, painting a vivid and damning picture of an obsessive ex-boyfriend who could not handle rejection. He argued that Tarr was driven by a possessive, all-consuming rage and had made the cold-blooded decision that if he couldn't have Leslie, then nobody could. The prosecution painstakingly presented their evidence: the litany of lies Tarr told police, his own daughter's testimony which shattered his alibi, the cell phone data and license plate cameras that tracked his murderous journey to Farmersville, and of course the murder weapon itself, found hidden on his property. The defense, led by attorneys Mark Wyckoff and Daniel Fultz, faced the uphill battle of fighting back without much evidence of their own. Their entire strategy hinged on highlighting the lack of direct forensic evidence. They repeatedly hammered the point that none of Tarr's DNA or fingerprints were discovered at the crime scene. They attempted to portray the state's case as one built on assumptions and coincidences, not on hard, irrefutable proof. Tarr himself chose not to take the stand, a strategic move to avoid a potentially devastating cross-examination that would have exposed his lies to the jury. The trial lasted for a week. Christopher Smith did not attend, later explaining that he knew he wouldn't have been able to control his rage sitting in the same room as the man who had destroyed his life. After hearing testimony from 22 witnesses and impassioned closing arguments, the case was handed over to the jury. They deliberated for less than 3 hours. The verdict came back on April 26, 2024, on, of all days, Bobby Tarr's 51st birthday. He was found guilty on all counts: 2 counts of first-degree murder for killing Leslie Reeves and 2 counts of attempted first-degree murder for shooting Christopher Smith. 2 months later, in July 2024, Tarr was back in court for his sentencing hearing. This time Chris Smith was there. He stood in court and delivered a powerful, gut-wrenching victim impact statement, confronting the man who had taken so much from him. He spoke of the 2.5 long years he had waited for this day. "I've lost my house," he said, his voice filled with pain. "I've lost my daughter being with me. I can't use my arm anymore. I can't use my leg anymore." Tarr also spoke, continuing to profess his innocence, a final hollow claim that no one was buying. The judge then handed down the sentence: 85 years in prison. At 51 years old, Robert Tarr was sentenced to spend the rest of his natural life behind bars. Justice, hard-won and long-awaited, had finally been served. The conviction of Robert Tarr may have closed the legal chapter of this harrowing story, but for Christopher Smith, the story is now one of lifelong recovery. His survival is nothing short of a medical miracle. The bullet that tore through his skull remains lodged in his head. Doctors have determined it is simply too risky to remove. In the aftermath of the shooting, he suffered 3 debilitating strokes, underwent complex and dangerous brain surgery, and spent months in a medically induced coma. When he finally woke up in January 2022, he had no memory of the shooting, no memory of his wonderful date with Leslie, or of the 2 hopeful weeks leading up to it. The physical devastation was immense. He was left paralyzed on the left side of his body and at first couldn't walk or use his left arm at all. His doctors grimly told him he might never walk again, a prognosis he defiantly refused to accept. His entire life was turned upside down. He lost his beloved home, which was callously sold at auction after looters had stolen nearly everything he owned, including his cherished musical equipment and family heirlooms, all while he lay helpless in a coma. He lost his business. He had to move back in with his parents, sacrificing the independence he had worked his entire life to build. The emotional toll was just as profound, especially the lost time with his young daughter. In a heartbreaking summary of his new reality, he has said, "I lost my life without being killed." And yet, in the face of this unimaginable loss, Chris Smith has shown the world the true meaning of resilience. Through grueling, painful physical therapy, he has slowly, painstakingly begun to reclaim his life. He is learning to walk again, aided by a bionic device fitted to his leg. He has launched a motivational speaking business, courageously sharing his story of survival to inspire others who are facing their own trauma. And in the ultimate act of defiance against the man who tried to silence him forever, he has even started singing with his rock band again, his voice once more a source of creation and joy. He has found new love and is now engaged to be married, proving that even after the darkest of nights, a new dawn is truly possible. While Chris's story is one of incredible survival, it is imperative that we remember the vibrant life that was stolen. Leslie Reeves was a devoted mother, a dedicated entrepreneur, and a passionate advocate for women. She was murdered not by a random stranger in a violent robbery, but by an ex-boyfriend who refused to let her go, a stark, tragic reminder of the lethal danger of domestic violence and stalking. Her death underscores how critically important it is for society to take these threats seriously and to support and believe victims. The case of Leslie Reeves and Christopher Smith is more than just a true crime story. It's a story about the fragility of life, and how suddenly a future filled with promise can be torn apart. It's a story about the darkness of obsession and the devastating fallout of unchecked rage. But in the end, it is also a story about the incredible, indomitable strength of the human spirit. It's about a community that rallied and demanded justice, a loyal dog that provided comfort in a moment of unimaginable crisis, and a survivor who, against all odds, chose to fight, to heal, and to live. He is not just a victim. He is living proof that even after a bloodbath, life can and will go on. The incredible courage Leslie Reeves showed in her final moments, and the unbelievable will to survive that Christopher Smith has demonstrated, are a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit in the face of pure evil. This case is also a tragic and urgent reminder of the hidden dangers of domestic violence and stalking. If you or someone you know is in a situation like this, please know that you are not alone and there is help available. We will leave a link in the description below to the National Domestic Violence Hotline. We tell these stories not for entertainment, but to honor victims like Leslie and to help raise critical awareness. If that is something you believe in, please consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications.